Welcome, International School of Indiana community. Thank you so much for joining us at this recorded video and audio podcast. At ISI, as many of you know, we have monthly heritage panels, and those heritage panels celebrate different communities and groups within our larger ISI family, parent, student, staff groups. And by doing that every month, we celebrate so many differences that connect us together as a whole. And this month, we are celebrating Hispanic Heritage with a Hispanic Heritage panel, a monthly heritage panel, and people who represent a variety of aspects of what Hispanic culture looks like here in Indiana today. So I want to thank Anasuya Das, our moderator for this panel, as well as the three panelists who will introduce themselves in a minute. So you'll get to hear from each of them and their connection to ISI and, of course, their connection to the Hispanic culture. So thanks again for being here. For those of you on the panel and the moderator, and thank you to the ISI community for listening in so that we can continue to connect in so many special ways at ISI. Anasuya.
Hello, everyone. Welcome. I'm very happy to be here to celebrate the Hispanic Heritage Month with the ISI community. A little about me. I'm an ISI parent. I have two kids. Zamira is in 5th grade Spanish track. Myra is in 2nd grade Spanish track. And I have been a member of the ISI community for 5 years now. And community to me is a very integral component of ISI. And so I'm very glad that each of us has taken the time from a very, very busy schedule to get to know our community. And I thank our panelists for taking time to talk to all of us about their experiences. So we're going to start off, and I'm going to ask each of the panelists to introduce themselves, and we will just go in alphabetical order to start off. And I want you to share your name, your connection to ISI, and what are your hopes for our discussion today. So I'm going to start off with Alejandro. Welcome, and we look forward to hearing from you.
Well, thank you very much, and thank you for organizing this, and thank you, co-panelists, for being here too. Really excited about this. I'm Alejandro Puga. I am the parent of two ISI children, both in the Spanish track. Oscar is in 1st grade, and Emilia is in pre-K. And we've been part of this community for a couple of years now, and very happily so. My family is Mexican, and I grew up in the United States, but throughout my life, I've traveled back and forth to Mexico for personal and professional and academic reasons, as well as spiritual reasons. And it continues to be one of my favorite places in the Spanish-speaking world. I have a bias towards it. I recognize that. But I've also been very fortunate to travel to other parts of the Spanish-speaking world and make them part of my life and part of my profession. I'm a professor of Hispanic Studies at DePaul University. And so I'm in a position where many of the things I live, I also get to theorize. And one would think that's cumbersome, but it actually gives me different ways of looking and thinking about heritage. And so I really look forward to sharing those, but also learning about my co-panelists.
Thank you so much, Alejandro. I'm going to move over to Claudia now. Welcome.
Thank you. And likewise, I'm very excited to participate in this panel, and thank you for organizing, and thank you for the invitation. My name is Claudia Verdugo Davis. I am originally from Colombia. I came to the United States to pursue my PhD in chemical engineering, which I completed at The Ohio State University. And when I was almost done with my PhD, I met my now husband, Jeremy Davis. We are the parents of Vienna Davis. She has been at ISI since kindergarten. She's in 6th grade now, and it has been a great journey to be part of the ISI community. And looking forward to, in this panel, learn from the co-panelists and share with you and with the community some of my experiences as an immigrant in this country.
Thank you, Claudia. We just got back from Colombia a few days ago, so thank you. Eric, on to you.
Thank you. So, good afternoon, everybody. My name is Eric Damian Rodriguez. I'm originally from Mexico. I have multiple connections for with ISI, but the main one is both my children, Andres being now a sophomore and Alessandra freshman at high school at ISI, and they've been attending for several years. My wife also, Claudia Rodriguez, who's worked at ISI as a bilingual kindergarten teacher since 2015. She even had a small tenure back in the 2000s before our kids were born. I'm here today because I believe conversations about identity, heritage, and our shared experiences are crucial for us to try to build a more inclusive community, which is something that I think that ISI really embraces day to day. And I hope this discussion will help highlight the diverse stories that shape our world that we've all been through and offer, a little bit of a new perspective on how our backgrounds influence our daily lives. I'm happy to be here. Thank you.
Thank you, Eric. And you brought up a very important point. Conversation is so important as, we get to know each other. So that's what we are here to do, is converse. So I'm going to start off actually by asking you again to continue along those lines, to talk about your heritage, to tell us what your ethnic or racial heritage is, and to identify every aspect of your heritage, if you can.
Thank you. Yes. So ethnicity, race, different different concepts. But the way I interpreted ethnicity is more related to the cultural background. I identify myself as a Latino, but Latino born and raised outside of this country. And being Mexican, it's a central part of my identity. But within that, I also recognize the diversity that exists within Mexico, right? From indigenous influences to European, African ones, all contributing to the broader picture of who we are. So my ethnic heritage is deeply rooted in Mexican culture. I was born and raised in Monterrey, Northeast Mexico, which is also rich in more of a northern history, traditions, family values, and this is what shaped who I am nowadays, right? Our heritage, our culture emphasizes the importance of close family bonds, respect for elders, strong work ethic. So growing up, we were surrounded for all this vibrant culture, Mexican culture, aspects of the Mexican culture, food, music, language, celebrations, traditions. But also living so close to the U.S., it's unique for us coming from Monterrey, Mexico. So being 2 hours from the border also had a strong influence of multiple aspects of the American culture. So there was a little bit of that growing up too.
Thank you, Eric. Alejandro, I'll punt the question to you. How do you want to describe your ethnic background or your heritage, racial heritage, so to speak?
Well, very much like Eric, I identify as a Latino, Latinx person, both professionally and personally in different spheres. As I said before, my family is Mexican. They're more from Mexico City, Eric. So you are the resident expert on Northern Mexican culture. But I love Northern Mexico very much too. And I love the diversity of Mexican culture. And it probably the thing I would throw in here is that the older I get and the more I live and explore it, the less authenticity becomes a thing for me. And I think one of the things that I'm learning about both ethnic and racial heritage is that it's always in flux, and that it ceases to be interesting when we put the word authentic on top of it. And so I draw, as Eric does, centrally from Mexican culture, but I think I've, in my professional life, and in my personal life too, the notion of a Hispanic culture is one of those things that's spectral to me. It's ever changing and ever in flux. But I think that as Eric is suggesting, that it behooves one to embrace all facets of Hispanic culture, even the ones one doesn't imagine. I think of my wife Molly a lot, who may not have come from this culture, but has embraced it so deeply and so passionately that it's hard not to consider her a Hispanic person in many regards. And so, I have that sense of central core ethnicity that is ever being challenged and is ever in flux.
Thanks, Alejandro. It's very interesting how you talk about culture as always being in flux. I never thought about it that way. That's a very interesting concept. And this other thing that was really cool was how you talked about embracing culture and how you don't necessarily have to be born in that culture to embrace it, which is, I think, the really, really interesting concept. Again, thank you. Claudia, moving on to you. What do you identify as your ethnic and racial heritage, and how do you describe your heritage?
Yeah, so I live in Mexico as well, and in about three years, I went to do my master there, and in a student environment, I been able to meet a lot of Hispanic, and I agree with the co-panelists. It's just like when we meet each other, we start sharing that energy that brings the Hispanic heritage culture. So in particular in Colombia, from Colombia, I may share some features that I consider very strong, like the desire for growth. Education is a path to achieve that growth, and everyone in Colombia wants to go to school, small or big. We always want to get an education. We work hard and play hard. We like music, and we are overall very happy people. We are proud of our rich culture. Most Colombians and Hispanics also love soccer and bring energy and motivation in anything we do.
Thank you, Claudia. I do identify or recognize how much soccer is part of the culture. It is everywhere. It was really fun because my son plays soccer too, and it was really fun to be in that environment. We're going to move on to our next topic, which is immigration. I would like to ask each of you what your story is, what your family's story of immigration is to the US. And, when you reflect on this, if you can think of any successes and challenges that you've encountered and how you've overcome those. And we're going to start off with Claudia. So if you can talk to us about your immigration story, that'll be great.
Yeah, so my story in the United States started as a student. I was talking about how being a student for a long time. I love education, so I actually I mentioned to study my PhD. So this process being accepted to the university was a long process and involved admission tests, including GRE, TOEFL, getting a scholarship for my first year, and ensuring I would have a research group to join as a PhD student. The biggest challenge, I think, was the language. I thought I knew English before I got here, but passing fluency exams is not the same as interacting with native speakers at full speed. It was a big challenge to overcome. The first year was also difficult because the schedule was very intense and there was not much time for socializing. Most students were also not Hispanic, and I needed to adapt to unfamiliar culture. I tried to take any opportunity to improve my English. The university offered numerous resources that were very, very helpful. All the same, learning English as an adult or any language really is a considerable challenge. And I am so pleased our kids at ISI have had the advantage of learning a language through that immersion program from a really young age. It is a huge advantage and was a primary consideration for enrolling Vienna at ISI. It has been very fulfilling to see her able to communicate with my parents and other relatives that are not English speakers. So she grows to be very close to them and experience that culture that is part of her, right? So yeah, that's my experience, how I came to this country.
That's fantastic. I mean, I did my PhD in engineering as well, and I was an international student. I came from India, but I came to do my undergraduate. But I cannot imagine learning a new language while getting my PhD. It was honestly, fabulous.
Yeah.
Moving on, Alejandro, could you tell us about your immigration story?
Sure. Very much like Claudia, some academic roots to the immigration story. My parents immigrated from Mexico City, to the tundras of Minnesota in I think it was 1968. So it was just before I was born. And my father's a physician. He's a retired heart surgeon. And my mother was a nurse. And so they moved there, and they moved to the Mayo Clinic, which was a very international, always has been a very sort of international institution and community in its own right. And so it was both a complete 180 degrees to what they were used to culturally, topographically, meteorologically, uh, in every possible way. But at the same time, there was this sort of base of international community there that, had it not been for that, I think they really would have felt some, and they did feel great. I think in my upbringing, I could see the times where they felt a lot of isolation and a sense of non-belonging. But at the same time, there was this community, and a sort of a pan-Hispanic community too. So it was interesting. The people that I grew up with were not cousins or members of a strictly Spanish-speaking or Hispanic neighborhood, but we were, Spaniards and Argentines and Colombians, and sort of listening to Claudia's story, it kind of takes me back to first impressions of when I saw this sort of play out in the midst of a Minnesota winter, just a beautiful tertulia with pozole and things like that. And I think that those are the kinds of things you look for, is that feeling of complete otherness at sometimes, and then finding solidarity or community where you might not expect it.
That's interesting how you talk about when you guys migrated, you found this community, and it did not distinguish between countries, right? Whether you're Mexican or Colombian, but it was just this Hispanic culture that kind of embraced you when your family migrated. And I feel like that happens a lot in a lot of migration stories, because you move from one particular country or one particular state of a country, and then when you move to this other country, you're embraced by this bigger community where you identify somehow. And that's a very interesting nuance, I feel, when I talk to a lot of my peers and they tell the same story. So that's very cool. Eric, how about your immigration story?
So mine was a little bit different. So I think it's a good mix here, right? Academics, and then Alejandro had grew up here. I moved when I was 26 years old to the U.S. So it was a different story. It wasn't academic related. Um, both Claudia and I moved here in the early 2000s, but she moved in 2002 for family. Some of her family was already established here, and for job opportunity. And I joined her a couple of years later, because by then we were dating and we were planning to get married, which we got married in 2004. But the plan was not to come to the U.S. to live forever here back in the day, right? We settled near Chicago, in the Chicago metro area, and after a year, circumstances happened, and as I was working through my immigration process, uh, we were, getting ourselves settled here for the time being, and I had an job opportunity in Indianapolis, and I took it. This was 2005, so we've been here since then. And like many other immigrants, right? Our journey has been filled with challenges, starting with, it wasn't necessarily a new language, but we obviously had to improve our skills on it. We had to navigate a very unfamiliar culture, adapting to the new different way of life and work. Obviously, the biggest hurdle in our situation was that we left behind everybody, both family and friends, right?
Mhm.
Closest family was in Chicago when we were here, so at least there was somebody a few hours from here, but nobody from my side. So it was hard, especially those early years. But we also have found success establishing ourselves here too. So that helped. We built our careers. Claudia is now a bilingual teacher, um, pretty settled in what she does, and she loves what she does. I'm an industrial engineer by trade, and I've been working at different industries, but I'm focused on the manufacturing side of things. And I feel like I'm developing a good career here. And we raised two children who are now fully bilingual and bicultural. So this immigration process was worth it, right? It wasn't easy at times, but this experience has also strengthened us, our resilience to, you know, to continue to do better, to be better, to just to do it for our families, right? But staying connected to both our roots and now what we call home, which is the U.S., right? And I can speak for myself, and I think I can speak for my family to say that this country has given us a lot, and we are very grateful for it.
Thanks, Eric. And since you moved here to Indianapolis, right, when you started, so I'm kind of curious, did you find such a community where you could kind of anchor, put your roots down and embrace when you moved here? And was ISI a part of that community when you were getting used to life in the US?
I would say yes. Coincidentally, when we moved in '05, Claudia was already a bilingual kindergarten teacher in Illinois, and she actually found a substitute teacher job a few months after she came in at ISI for a small period of time. But the minute that she got into that building, the 49th Street building, she felt like this was the place she wanted to work at. Then she got an opportunity a year later as a full-time teacher, and then she left in order for because we decided as a family that she was going to have the kids and raise them without working full-time for a few years. And we quickly found out that this was for us, this was a better environment than what Chicago was, even though Chicago was where some of the family was, to raise our kids. I mean, we felt like this was a better spot it was a good spot for us.
Thank you. Alejandra, I'll go to you first for our next question, which targets the American experience. So how would you describe how your race and ethnic heritage has adapted to or helped influenced by your American experience or identity? So how has living in the US impacted your racial or ethnic heritage?
Well, I would say that just living the past 50 years, watching what the word American means to people just change completely and turn itself on its own ear has been an education unto itself. But I think I remember from a very early age being lectured by my father when I came home from school, and he would hone in especially on American history courses and interrogate those. And he would have a lot to say about it, but he was the first person to explain to me that an American is not necessarily somebody from the United States. And I remember it crystallized with me years ago. I was teaching one of my first Spanish classes, and they had this in the textbook. They had this photograph with the Chilean artist Alfredo Jar or Hard. I'm so embarrassed that I don't know how to pronounce his name. Chilean Spanish, very, very complex stuff. But he had this thing in Times Square where it was a sort of a neon map of the United States, and it said, "This is not America" on top of that isolated map of the United States. And I remember really crystallized with me that my sense of being American was going to be at odds with a lot of people who had a much different sense of being an American. And I think that still continues, but I'm glad that I can pass that on to my kids too, as they start to parse out what it means to be American for them, that at the very least, there is a difference of opinion in the hemisphere as to what constitutes America to begin with. Having said that, I think that, I just, in times where national identities need to be interrogated and deconstructed and questioned, I'm glad I had an upbringing that primed me for that.
Thank you, Alejandra. You bring up a very interesting point, a very true point. And also to add on to that, I feel like it's so personal. What is to be an American? What is to be someone from your own country? I'm going to move over to Eric now. Eric, how do you answer this question?
I would say that my heritage has been influenced or adapted, but the core, my identity and the core of my Mexican heritage remains there. I mean, it was my personal experience, right? I was born and grew up until I was a young adult in Mexico. So I think the core is going to be very, very for me, for my personal experience, it's not changing. It's adapting, absolutely. It has been influenced, absolutely. Um, but the core is there, right?
Mhm.
I mean, it wasn't always easy. When you learn to navigate, between trying to preserve the culture and what you have, where you came from, and who you are, but at the same time embracing the goods of what American life offers too, right? To say just because it's different doesn't mean from what you're used to or you grew up with doesn't mean it's bad, right? It's just different. Embrace it, and there's going to be some positives at it. Not everything, obviously, but some of it. So I would say in some ways, being in the U.S. has broadened my view of what it means to be a Latino. I mean, I don't think I would have the opportunity if I would have just stayed in Monterey to interact with as many people from different backgrounds from Mexico as I had the opportunity to do it now that I live in the US. I mean, just to have probably people from 25, 30 different states that I may have interacted in the past few years, whether it's at the store, or whether it's at a different company, etc. Right? I mean, it not only has the influence that you get from the American culture and the American citizens, but also from the other Latinos that are here. I probably wouldn't have the opportunity to learn more about the Venezuelan culture if it wasn't from me being here, interacting with Venezuelans, right? So we adapt and we learn and we embrace all of that, and that defines, or that, I guess, polishes your heritage in a way to where you embrace those influences in order uh, to make that Latino background, I guess, richer. Um, and at the same time, I think that my children growing up here, they have a hybrid identity. I'm not sure, but I got a good feel in a way, they feel equally comfortable with both cultures, which I think it's something rich too. And I hope they embrace it and they fully understand that's just gonna given that richness in their lives, right? So the openness of multiple cultures. Uh, um, but yes, migrating here has definitely make my appreciation for my heritage greater than if it would have never happened.
Thank you, Eric. I like the words you used, embracing and richness in polishing. I feel like those are such great words when we put our culture under those perspective and under those lens. Claudia, can you tell us a little bit about how your ethnic heritage is adapted or been influenced by your American experience?
Yeah, I mean, I agree a lot on what Alejandra and Eric said, and all of these words resonated really, really well. I mean, the core is there. I had adapted very well, but I also miss, my Colombian food and music, but that doesn't change also the impact of my ability to adapt it. So it's kind of like go both ways. I enjoy both cultures. Pleased that I can visit my family at least for Christmas. Is the time where in Colombia families get together and share joyful, vibrant traditions. I think that for us as an adult, because that core is there, so it's very strong. It is a challenge, but it's also nice to see kids that have that hybrid identity, just the same word that Eric used, because the way I see it, like with Vienna, any opportunity to show that it's Colombian, and I love that at ISI, the international parades, you represent what country do you want to represent, and she steps immediately to say, I'm Colombian. So having that identity, those opportunities, is an amazing way to show that diversity, that embracing a culture, but also being able to instill in them, that part of us that keeps growing and keeps, enriching their lives as well.
Thank you, Claudia. Moving on to our next question, we're going to talk about racialization. So my challenge to you, the question is, have you encountered race as an element of your experience in America? And we're going to start with Eric first.
Okay. Yes, I have. There's been more than one time where somebody has asked me where I'm from, right? They listen to your language skills, and they ask, where are you from? I'm from Mexico. Like, you don't look Mexican. And I say, what does that mean? What does that looking Mexican mean? So those types of situations, I think some of us have faced before. It does have played a noticeable role in my experience being a Latino here. You kind of feel sometimes as an outsider because of, because of the accent or the appearance or the assumptions for the background, stereotyping it, or certain misconceptions about being Mexican, right? They just all assume that we're all certain skin color, a certain height, or we all use mustache instead of like. So those situations have happened, unfortunately. And sometimes I've been to a situation where you have to almost feel like you have to prove your capabilities. You start sensing that people's perceptions are a little off, and they're more pushed towards ethnicity and where you come from more than who you are and what your capabilities as a professional are. But despite all of this, I think communication, education, just communicating, right? Starting to learn from each other, starting to be open to listen, and for them to start listening to you breaks a lot of these fake walls. And yeah, there's been some I would say some hiccups throughout my 20 years in the U.S. with some things have been uncomfortable. Some things have not necessarily been uncomfortable there, but they're still there. And my kids being born here, I hope they're having a different experience, but also I would assume they face moments of feeling different. Like, am I really truly from here or from there, or what is it to be from both sides, right? From both places. So I think part of our role as parents is just equip them with that confidence to navigate through those challenges because they're going to happen. We've also noticed that it tends to be regionalized sometimes, right? Perhaps in certain areas of the Midwest or certain areas where you stop by, you might face some more of those versus other areas that have more of a multicultural environment, right? But yes, it has been part of our experience, race in the U.S. Some goods and some not so goods.
Thank you, Eric. Claudia, I'm curious if your experience has been similar or different in some ways.
Yeah, I mean, to a certain extent, there are similarities. What I would say is that my experience with regard to racialization is different depending on the environment inside and outside organizations, I would say. For example, at the university, schools, work environment, I think there is an effort in creating a culture of respect and appreciation for diversity. In addition, in my field, science is differences in opinions and perspectives are welcome, and that helps to welcome individuals from different cultures and races. Unfortunately, there are still situations impacted by racialization, whether conscious or not. That happens. So my experience at the beginning, I reacted more strongly to those situations. And over time, I have learned to use these situations as an opportunity to communicate, to learn whenever possible, and educate, because a lot of times I have noticed that, people make assessments or jokes, and they maybe they seem innocent, right? But they don't recognize the impact that they may have in our community, or the history behind that, right? So I call it my my coaching or opportunities. So I, start, talking about whenever possible, right? Like, how is this impacting us? So I think that that is really it creates a value, not only because the majority of the times it's very well received, and it's appreciated that we convey that way, because it's a way also that it's important for us also to express always respectful, and communicate that that sense of how is that perceived, right? It's a little bit more challenging when it happens outside of organizations, because you don't know when it's appropriate or not to get involved, and it's a little bit more challenging, right? But in general, I think that it's important to state when possible how we feel about that, and create these opportunities for communication and learning.
Thank you, Claudia. Alejandra, I'm curious, since you are in a university setting, if you agree that the university environment provides the space for acceptance more than anywhere else.
It can, and it can fail miserably, that too. And so, yeah, I think I was really glad that my co-panelists went first. I appreciate the way they shared their experience. I know that some of this is not so easy. And I think what strikes me is how quickly they responded in the affirmative to the base question: is there racialization in your life? You bet there is. And I think that it's interesting that in a group like this, it's easy to say that so quickly and so affirmatively, and not have to navigate is it something else, or people's intentions versus their actions, and so on and so forth. And so my experience has been that too, is that you know what you know when you know it, and when you see it, and when you hear it. The dynamics, in my life have changed quite a bit. When I was growing up, I was only attuned to, the sort of apoplectic, really direct kinds of affronts that you would hear. But the older I got, the more I entered professional life. It was really the really shocking part was otherwise educated people not being able to see what I was seeing. That became apparent to me when I got married too, very quickly. I really underestimated how being part of an interracial couple was going to be threatening and difficult for otherwise educated people at times, and not to point out individuals or to point out incidents or to name names, but just to say that on the whole, wow, this is actually harder for people to accept than I would have expected. And to hear things such as, well, we don't see you as any different, and not being able to see the insult in that. And I think if I'm gonna hone in on one piece of racialization, and I think it is that, right? Racialization, it is the assigning of race that becomes so tricky. I think the thing that I find most that deserves my attention the most, that deserves my challenge the most, is the putting of oneself in an arbiter's position when one is no arbiter of things like race. And I think that that's probably been the biggest hurdle, is to convince racializing presences in my life that the problem here is that they're taking it upon themselves to decide this is where everybody fits and this is where everybody belongs. And so it continues. I like very much what my co-panelists have said, is that, there are degrees and kinds, and there are registers. And then there's something else, is that one cannot function addressing everything that comes their way. And the difficulties when one is the only person in the room, let's say, or in other scenarios like that. And so, I just agree that yes, it's absolutely there. Yes, it is part of daily life, but as Claudia is suggesting, there's also an opportunity here to speak more frankly about these things and to not simply resist, but to interrupt them when they happen. And as for universities, I'll just say quickly that yes, I mean, everything has changed and is changing very quickly from one year to the next. We saw something that we thought was pretty permanent, DEI, suddenly become interrogated. We've seen the clash between the willingness to protect vulnerable communities and also the desire to maintain free speech and to find one's place in an environment like that. And so it is complicated stuff. But I'm glad that it's happening. I'm glad that it's not just easy answers out there.
Thank you. And I just want to echo what Alejandro said and thank you for accepting and recognizing this as a safe space to talk openly about everything. These are hard issues, and I'm very, very grateful that all of you are taking the efforts to talk to us today. We're going to move on to our next question, and I'm going to start with Claudia. What role do you think gender has played in your American experience?
Yeah, so I'm gonna start by addressing maybe from the professional perspective, which is where it kind of like start and maybe I have thought about that. So and let me start by saying that I think professional growth opportunities are not always guaranteed, and any success comes with significant challenges. And to be honest, I sometimes wonder if my gender or Hispanic heritage is a factor that brings additional challenges. Um, but these are generally like those that are there, but I cannot let them affect me to the point that it stopped my or justify challenges and to go on next steps or on growth, right? I believe that again, professional growth always comes with challenges, and whether it's a man or a woman, hard work and dedication and perseverance are the greatest tool for success in life. I think that this is a hard topic as well as the one that we covered before. It sometimes is so subtle that it's just hard to make a statement, because it always, in professional life, it's always your work. What at the end of the day, it may be at some point a factor, but it's nothing compares or nothing. I believe that if you demonstrate with work, with integrity and perseverance, you finally overcome all those obstacles. In other areas, I think that it's been I mean, as part of in general in the world, I think that gender is a factor, unfortunately, in some countries more than others. But there is a big effort as well in communities to make sure that is not an obstacle, and women are, or really all genders in general, are treated the same.
Thanks, Claudia. I do recognize it's really hard to identify if there's discrimination at play or not. And I hear where you're coming from. Alejandro, what do you have to say about this question?
Yeah, it's one of those junctures at which, I know some gender theory. I don't know a lot. I know experiences that I've had. I know stories. I think my wife, Molly, has been probably the person who has made me recognize gendered spaces and gendered discourses more than any other individual, as somebody who is making a name for herself professionally and encountering these things in very real and very intimate ways. And so it helps me as I read up on it. But I also, I also look at it as part of cultural constructs. And I think about the construct of masculinity that was presented to me when I was very young. And this is what it meant to be a man and to become a man. And to have those men then later in life tell me, this actually was wrong. Or I've actually learned that since I had that talk with you, or since you've read that book. And I just, this as difficult as it can be to think about gender fluidity as beyond binaries and things like that, I'm once again very grateful that we're living in that moment of inflection. And so, yeah, I approach gender in very lived ways, but then, it is both a source of cultural richness and cultural oppression, and it can be a very complicated thing. And so it's one of those things I'm still learning a lot about.
Thank you, Alejandro. That's very interesting, and I really appreciate your points there. Eric, what do you think of gender, and how do you think gender has affected your American experience?
I'm trying to piggyback from what Alejandro was saying. I think there's, to me, in my personal experience, there's still a lot that I'm learning. We're living in a great moment of our times where we're finally open to taking this concept to a more broader understanding, right, and acceptance. In my experience, as a man, as a Latino man, growing up, being aware of these certain expectations and stereotypes that society places on, having that background and having that experience of watching my grandparents, my parents, uncles, cousins, you name it, this often image the machismo that many people associate with, especially with Latinos, could be very limiting, could be very just like, instead of bring you a better picture, it brings you a different, incorrect picture of what, in my opinion, should be, right? I've been trying to push back that stereotype, both in my professional and my role as husband and parent, and father. I think for us, the response is just about responsibility and support, right? Providing for the family, but at the same time being engaged with the family, with the partners, breaking down those traditional gender roles, right? And we as parents are trying to provide that message to our children. I do see that since I came to this country, the U.S., I think there's more emphasis on equality than what I recall in my personal life in Mexico. I think we were a decade or two ahead in this country from where I was coming from. I haven't been living in Mexico for the past 20 years, and I'm truly hoping that there's been progress in that regard too. And I cannot speak for it, but I do believe that we were moving in the closer direction to get to a better equality at the workplace here. And I've been trying to carry that forward with my teams, with anybody that I've interacted with here. Collaboration, respect, and regardless of the gender, right? I mean, it's just that support. It's one of those, I would say, positive things about the English language, that the gender is not there, and compared to our language, it's like, oh, there's one step easier to talk about equality around here, right? So that's not something that I do believe it's a positive, it's a work in progress. We all need to continue working towards that. So while my gender is part of who I am, I don't let that define me, and I don't want to just make sure that my family just embraces that same message.
Thank you, Eric. Thank you all for taking time to talk about such difficult topics today. And from what I've gathered, it's like you all are great people, very successful people, parents, community members, and you have, dual heritage, and you're doing such great jobs in raising families while embracing the quote unquote American culture and holding on to your quote unquote Hispanic culture. It's been fabulous getting to know all of you. So in the end, I would like to go in reverse alphabetical order, and we will talk about, just some final words, like what was important to you about sharing your story today in the context of your relationship with ISI. So I will start with Eric.
First of all, thank you for this opportunity. At first, when I thought about joining it, I was thinking, well, and seeing some other people that have participated in the past, like I may not be the big entrepreneur, successful entrepreneur that can speak about, how I built up my company or became the president of this corporation whatsoever. But at the end of the day, we all have a little bit that we can share and that we can try to expect that somebody will take some of from your own experiences, and at the same time, I could learn and take some of that experiences from both Alejandra and Claudia, and so there's always an opportunity to learn and share that might help others, right? Um, I think one of the biggest takeaways for me is like we listening to everybody is I think we all share some of the similarities of our own experiences, but at the same time, we all have some uniqueness to our life experience here. And I'm very grateful for first and foremost, I'm from being Latino and my heritage. I am very proud of where I came from, who I am, um, my roots. I'm also very grateful for this in American influence and the fact that I was able to move to a different country, and this country really received us with open arms. And most of our experience has been positive. We found our now we call it home here. It has been very fortunate that we can interact with multiple cultures, with multiple people from different backgrounds, different countries, different languages, different experiences. And I think that if we can all understand that that's just going to make us richer as people, I think there will be I think we can all learn something, right? And be better, try to bring something back to our own society, right? And just understanding that in our differences, what the richness is. We just need to embrace it. Thank you.
Thank you, Eric. Claudia.
Yeah, thank you so much for the invitation. I think it was a great experience to get together to know Alejandro, Eric, and you, and of course, Liz. Thank you so much for organizing these events. It's being able to share our experiences and see if this helps the community. From the perspective of common different experiences and understanding. My main message, as we touch on difficult topics for the community and for our kids, is how important the communication is, how important are these open scenarios where we can share. And as we share these experiences, the way that we address these topics that sometimes are difficult, continue creating this culture of respect and appreciation for diversity, honest communication, and teaching that to our kids is something that I really appreciate from the school and from this event. Thank you.
Thank you, Claudia. Alejandro?
Yes, just echoing the thanks to the co-panelists and the organizers. This has been a lot of fun. I've really enjoyed it. It used to be I would come to something like this trying to keep track of where I might say something dumb, and then prevent that from happening to the best of my ability. And I might have succeeded or not this time, but I think the more I do encounters like this, and I do not do them enough, is that I'm interested someday in playing this back and seeing what has changed, and whether I look at things differently or not. And just to sort of echo what both Claudia and Eric are saying, these don't have to be grandiose stories, but they do have to be stories. And I think that goes back to what Liz was saying, that, you know, at the end of the day, the sharing of stories is an incredibly important act. And perhaps in our product-oriented lives, we don't take enough time to just think about the narratives and the ways we get entangled in things. And so I think Claudia's comments about communication are important there too. This has been a nice space where we can go off on little tangents and things like that, and know that we're still circling around the same ideas, and even though we may see them differently, that we know where the conversation is. And so it's been a lot of fun, and thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you all for sharing your unique stories and being a part of our conversation today. I really appreciate all your time. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Anasuya, for your leadership here today, and the three co-panelists, Eric, Claudia, and Alejandro. What a pleasure to hear your stories, not only as the head of school of an international school, but having lived in Costa Rica for 20 years, so much of what you shared is what I'm so passionate about, especially with the connection to Hispanic culture, but then being able to be in this rich, diverse community that we call school every day is a pretty special gift. So thank you for sharing your story and being part of this day today with us. And to the international school community who's listening, I hope you also have appreciated this time, and we can all remember why being together, even though we are so unique and different, is so special, and what we love about the ISI community. So thank you so much.